Hello, my friends. This is Robb Ryerse, and this is the second episode of my brand new podcast. It's pronounced Ryerse. It's not Ryerse. It's not Ryerse. It's not reverse, as you sometimes get from telemarketers. It's pronounced Ryerse with a long E on the end. You might not know this, but my family actually fought for the British in the American Revolution, and were kicked out of the country as a result of that. And when they left the country, they moved to Canada and founded a little town called Port Ryerse, and many of them changed the name from Ryerson to Ryerse. And so I've got distant uncles who are Ryersons, and immediate family that are Ryerses. And then there was one distant uncle who added an extra E on the end to make it very clear that it's pronounced Ryerse. So yes, this is the podcast. It's pronounced Ryerse. It is my take on the intersection of faith and politics and things that are going on in the world. Thank you for checking us out on Facebook Live and for listening in on the audio version of the podcast, which is now available on iTunes. If you are an Apple user, ask you to subscribe, to leave a 5-star review, right? And write a little comment. That would be greatly appreciated. Working on getting us on Spotify and Google Play and all those other places. Encourage you to send any comments or questions that you've got to me. You can find me online on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, on everywhere at Robb Ryerse, or you can shoot me an email at rob@robbryerse.com. And remember, just like it's pronounced Ryerse, Rob has 2 B's on it. So I'm going to be sharing with you some of my thoughts about what's going on in the world and what's taking place, particularly in the world of politics, and how that impacts us and affects us, and what it might mean for particularly for people of faith, but anyone who's engaged in this world. So what we're going to do is have a bit of a rundown of some of the big stories from this past week, and then I'm also going to share a big idea with you and give you my thoughts on some things, and then we're going to close things off with a bit of a benediction, because as you probably know, you might know, I'm a pastor, and want to leave you with some words to think about that can help make sense of where we're at. So that being said, let's jump into it, and let's begin the rundown, where I'm going to talk about some different things that are taking place in the country and in the world, give you my take on them, and try not to spend too much time dwelling on them. So first off, we need to revisit the impeachment trial. Yeah, that happened since the last time we were together. It feels like, it's been a whole year since a week ago. So over the weekend, the Senate voted to acquit Donald Trump of the crime of inciting a riot against the Capitol building, and Vice President Mike Pence and those who were in the Capitol on January 6th. Working on certifying the Electoral College, as is their constitutional duty, representatives in the House as well as senators. And there were 7, in fact, Republican senators who put country over party and voted in favor of impeachment and conviction. And so a couple of things about this, just to kind of keep in mind. Donald Trump might have gotten away with it twice. But he has been impeached twice. No other president has ever done that. He also received more votes for conviction of his impeachment in the Senate than any other impeached president ever has. These are clear historical distinctions for Donald Trump that will stay with him forever. We know that, just thinking back to the size of the crowd that he bragged about during his inauguration, he loves to have historical things be a part of his legacy, and he certainly has one. But here's the thing about the impeachment trial, and why I wanted to talk about it. This is one of those things that we just cannot let go away. This is one of those things that we just can't think, okay, well, that took place, can't we just move on? The reality is that an insurrection against our duly elected leaders was incited by the President of the United States and motivated by white Christian nationalism and fueled by a conspiracy theory, and no justice has been done. Lives were lost in the Capitol on January 6th, and justice has not yet been served. And until it is, we cannot move on. I'm really proud to be one of the signers of a declaration against white Christian nationalism by a number of over 100 evangelical pastors and leaders across the country. And I encourage you to check it out, and I'll try to share a link to it because we cannot move on from this until justice is served. And it is tremendously important that justice be served. It was not through the impeachment trial of Donald Trump and his conviction, their failure to convict him, but it has to be now. Okay, moving on, but staying with Donald Trump. Donald Trump apparently has turned his ire not against Sleepy Joe Biden, but against Mitch McConnell, Senate Minority Leader, Republican leader in the Senate. Trump put out a statement this week from his office of the former president, office of the former social media influencer, office of the former reality TV star, office of the former president, put out a statement criticizing McConnell, urging Republicans to move on from McConnell as their leader. And this from an article from Politico about that statement. Here's a direct quote. A person familiar with crafting of the statement confirmed that it could have been far worse. An earlier draft mocked McConnell for having multiple chins, the person said. But Trump was convinced by advisors to take it out. Donald, I don't know why I find this so funny. Listen, here's the thing with Donald Trump. He demands loyalty from the people around him, and he has no loyalty towards other people. Mitch McConnell has defended, protected, helped Donald Trump throughout the last 4 years, including making sure that the impeachment trial did not take place while he was still president, and then objecting to the impeachment trial because he was no longer president. Come on, Mitch McConnell. Showing so much loyalty to him, only to have Donald Trump stab him in the back and make fun of his chins. This guy, listen, I know we're talking about him, but aren't you so glad you don't get up every day thinking about what Donald Trump is tweeting or putting out into the universe? It's absolutely ridiculous. And poor Mitch McConnell has once again gotten the ire of Donald Trump. Speaking of Donald Trump, still, did you see this news out of Atlantic City that the eyesore that is the Trump Plaza was detonated this week, and Trump goes boom boom in Atlantic City. I've got fond memories of Atlantic City. When Vanessa and I were first married, we lived in Staten Island, and one weekend we decided to get away, and we went to Atlantic City for the weekend. But we kept it a big secret because I was pastoring a church at the time, a fundamentalist church, and we weren't allowed to, gamble or anything like that. And so we went in February to Atlantic City, and we stayed at the Tropicana, and we got this oceanfront room with an ocean view. They gave us money for to gamble with, chips to gamble with. They gave us meal tickets and show tickets and a bottle of wine, and we had an amazing time. And I remember we were sitting in a McDonald's in Atlantic City that weekend when we decided we were going to begin to try to have kids. We thought it was time. Okay, now let's start a family. And so I have fond memories of Atlantic City. I'm not sure Donald Trump does. Because what Donald Trump did in Atlantic City was go bankrupt over and over and over again. I know this is not an original observation to make, but how do you go bankrupt at running a casino? This is ridiculous. Casinos print money. You don't win against the house. Casinos always come out on top, right? Unless they're run by Donald Trump. And so apparently the Trump Plaza Casino in Atlantic City has been empty since 2014 and was an eyesore, and so torn down this week to make way for something new. And listen, symbolism is the best, right? You remember the statue of Saddam Hussein being toppled in Iraq and the symbolism of that. You remember David Hasselhoff dancing on top of the rubble of the Berlin Wall. The symbolism is fantastic, and we had a bit of that in Atlantic City this week. And so as the Trump Plaza goes boom boom, I hope that maybe in your hearts the cruel reign of Donald Trump goes boom boom as well. So my goodness, can you believe the storm we had this week? I don't know where you're at in the world, but here in Arkansas we had about 6 inches of snow come in, and then a couple of days after that, a couple more inches of snow come in. I am originally a northerner growing up in Cleveland, Ohio, and so when it snows, you shovel. So I've been out twice to shovel my driveway, and kind of amused at my neighbors who haven't. This winter storm has gripped the nation, particularly Texas. We have all learned a lot more about how power grids work, haven't we? We know stuff now that we didn't know before. We know that Texas has their own power grid for much of the state that's not interconnected with the rest of the country because they wanted to be free of federal regulation and go it alone. And that apparently much of what the people of Texas are experiencing is a result of that, despite their governor going on the news to blame it all on the Green New Deal. Hey, Governor Abbott, you do realize that the Green New Deal isn't a thing yet, right? And maybe if it was, we would be much better prepared to handle weather emergencies and energy emergencies that come about as a result of climate change. And while I'm at it, hey, you conservative Republicans who want to poke fun about global warming, listen, it's climate change. Don't be so obtusely anti-intellectual that you just make yourself look dumb. Speaking of looking dumb in the midst of a storm, can you believe Ted Cruz? Of course you can believe Ted Cruz. I mean, you can't believe what Ted Cruz says, but you can absolutely believe that Ted Cruz, while millions of people in the state that he represents are without power and without water, he gets on a plane to go on vacation in Cancun. And apparently, every story he's told now has been debunked. At first, he said he just had to take his daughters. They wanted to go get away, and he was just taking them to drop them off. Come on. Who just flies to Mexico to drop off their 12 and 10-year-old daughters? This is not a sleepover around the block. You flew to another country. Like, don't tell us these ridiculous things. And now reports are that his wife was texting her friends, encouraging them to go with them. I mean, it was all this ridiculous thing. And Ted Cruz is shown to be a liar who abandons the people of his state. Meanwhile, his favorite target on Twitter, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, has raised $2 million for Texas charities to help in the recovery. So let's talk about, the fruit of what people do to see what kind of people they are. Rush Limbaugh died this week, and got to be honest with you, I've had pretty complicated feelings about Rush's death. I was a ditto head growing up. I've told the story on the Vote Common Good tour several times, but when I was 16 years old, I skipped school one day so I could call into the Rush Limbaugh show and got on the air. That was the first of 5 times that I made it on the air to talk to Rush. I had a charter member of the vast right-wing conspiracy mug. I had a subscription to the Limbaugh letter. I had a Rush 24/7 subscription. I mean, I was in deep. And then over time, my theological and political views began to shift and change. And the political education I received from Rush Limbaugh, I realized was not just slanted, but tremendously damaging. And now I look at someone that I used to revere greatly and essentially think he's responsible for much of the radicalization that has taken place in our country. And his legacy is one that is full of racism, misogyny, homophobia, xenophobia, hate, and division. And while I once looked at Rush as a hero, I now look at Rush as a real tragic figure. And one who I have no doubt loved our country, but that love was misguided and ended up doing much more harm than good. And I think as I think about Rush and I think about kind of where we are as a country and what I believe about the world, I was deeply impressed and kind of moved by the tweet of Marianne Williamson, who said, I believe in a God who is very tenderly explaining some things to Rush Limbaugh right now. Limbaugh, I assume, is very quiet and taking it all in. Speaking of controversial figures, those who have kind of shifted, the perception of them has shifted. Andrew Cuomo, governor of New York, who wrote a book about leadership in light of the coronavirus pandemic and was, touted as the one who should replace Joe Biden on the Democratic ticket because of his excellent leadership, finds himself now embroiled in scandal because his administration in New York underreported COVID deaths in nursing homes to make the state look better. and has shown to be rather abusive in terms of his leadership style and character and the way he treats those who oppose him. There are reports now that he has threatened state senators. I have a friend in New York who is running for Manhattan city president, Lindsey Boylan, who has made accusations against Andrew Cuomo during her time in the governor's office. Read some additional tweets this morning about apparently the way his campaign I think in 2012 catfished a gay man who was on the staff of one of his opponents. Listen, Mario Cuomo, we got to be careful before we put people on pedestals, folks. Just because somebody has a good press conference doesn't mean it's time to, put them on a pedestal. Just because someone could be the, anti-Trump in terms of how we love and support him. And there was a time when Andrew Cuomo seemed like he would be that one who would fill in the gap, be the foil to Donald Trump's incompetence. He was showing competence. Let's give it time for the fruit to ripen, and let's see what's actually there. And let's be willing to call a spade a spade. And we got a real problem in New York. And that real problem starts at the top in the governor's office with Andrew Cuomo. Each week I want to make a recommendation to you. And today I want to recommend the documentary Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. This documentary is fantastic. It was produced by CNN. I think it's available now. Well, I say I think. I know it's available now on HBO Max because that's where I watched it. It's a documentary about our 39th president, Jimmy Carter, and his relationship to the music industry. And talks about his friendship with Willie Nelson, his friendship with the Allman Brothers, his friendship with Bob Dylan, about how his campaign for president was fueled by the support of musicians who would help him raise money. Talks about how he supported music through his presidency. And there's great little nuggets that get revealed along the way, like the story of his son and Willie Nelson smoking pot in the White House. And I got to tell you, I grew up thinking Jimmy Carter was the worst president in the history of the country. And I got to think now that, man, Jimmy Carter is exactly the kind of person I would want to be president. This movie, this documentary, helps to tell a fuller story about our 39th president than I had been told about him. And it is endearing and funny and engaging and inspiring. And I got to recommend it to you if you haven't seen it. It is so good. And it's also really interesting because Jimmy Carter was the face of white evangelicalism in the 1970s. He was, long before the moral majority and all of that, like Jimmy Carter was the evangelicals' president. He was the born again president. And it's so interesting to me that at a time when, in the type of Christianity that I was raised in, that was very anti-rock music, and we would have seminars about how evil it was and sermons about how awful it was, and all of that here at this very time, Jimmy Carter's faith and his love of counterculture like dovetailed together and in fact worked together. And I just find it so tremendously inspiring. You're going to love this documentary. Check it out. It's Jimmy Carter, Rock and Roll President. And check out the really fantastic Spotify playlist that exists, inspired by the documentary. It's really great. Check it out. So today's big idea. I've kind of touched on it a little bit, talking about Rush, talking about Andrew Cuomo, talking about Jimmy Carter. The big idea is that political evolutions happen. They're frustrating, they're messy, but they're also possible. And that's a really important thing, because I want you to remember, I want you to know that people change. They do. You might have in your life right now, and I can't tell you how many times I have conversations like this with people where they tell me about a family member, they tell me about a friend, they tell me about people they know, and they go, well, this is where they're coming from. How are they ever going to change? How can anything be different? And I want to assure you that people do change. Not everybody, and most people not very quickly. But political evolutions, transformations, they're frustrating, they're messy, but they happen. I'm living proof. I talked about how I was a member of the Rush Limbaugh army, and now I have significantly shifted in my political beliefs. So they have moved from very conservative to not very conservative, to say the least. The question becomes is how people change. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Certainly, there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of things, and I think it's important to remember. And what we look for is like some kind of formula, some kind of black and white process that we can impose on people, that if we do A, B, and C, then the outcome of X, Y, and Z is guaranteed to happen. The reality is that like there is no formula to bring about change in people's life. Like there is no discipleship process that if you do this, then this outcome is going to happen. It doesn't work like that. But instead, there are all sorts of different factors that play into change happening in our lives, whether it's theological or personal or political. How people change is the result of information coming their way, new information. You learn something that opens up your eyes and causes you to think differently and perceive things differently. Though it's important to remember that information alone is not guaranteed to change people's minds. When I was a fundamentalist Christian and we used to have to, evangelize people to help them become Christians as well, we used to have this saying that we would say, that this trope that we would say, this little reminder that you can't argue someone into the kingdom of God. You can't argue someone into your political perspective. Information's important, but winning an argument isn't often the thing that brings about political evolution in our friends' or families' lives. There's the experiences that we have. There's that old saying that if you're not a liberal by the time you're 20, you don't have a heart. And if you're not a conservative by the time you're 40, you don't have a brain. There's kind of this recognition that our life experiences cause us to change our political perspectives. I don't know what it says about me that I went the opposite way. I was a conservative at 20 and a progressive at 40. That must mean I don't have a brain or a heart or whatever. But our life experiences cause us to evolve and change. And particularly as a part of that, the relationships that we have. And when we come into relationship with people and we see things from different perspectives, it helps us to kind of have a fresh view of how things are. And widening our perspectives to see that other people view things in different ways, that other people have had different experiences. That's one of those things that is so tremendously important to political change. And so I would encourage you, those of you that might be tempted to break relationship with people over politics, I would encourage you not to do that, because relationships are the road on which truth travels best, to paraphrase a pastor I heard once. And I'd also remind you of this. It is very tempting for us to get mean and angry when it comes to politics, to get frustrated, to get vindictive, to try to win arguments and to do it in sarcastic or snarky ways. And I just remind you, and listen, I'm totally tempted by this too, and often fall prey to this. But I would just remind you and myself that that cruelty doesn't bring about change. Kindness does. One of my favorite passages in the Bible is a little verse that's easy to miss in Romans, where it says that it is God's kindness that leads us to repentance. It's not judgment. It's not shame. It's not fear. It's not guilt. It's not threats. It's kindness that leads us to repentance. It's kindness that changes our hearts. And I'm curious, I wonder about what kindness might look like in our politics, and how it might change things if we were kinder to each other. In Les Mis, one of my favorite scenes is when Jean Valjean is on the run, and he stays with a priest, and then he's found out that he's there, and so he's got to leave in a hurry, and he steals. He's escaped from prison, and he steals from the priest some silver candlesticks, and he's caught, and he's brought back to the priest, and the authorities take Jean Valjean back to the priest and say, "Hey, these candlesticks are yours. Should we charge this man for stealing them from you?" And the priest says, "Oh, Jean Valjean, you took the candlesticks, but you didn't take the rest of the silver that I gave you as well." And he loads up his bag with these very expensive and prized pieces of silver, and whispers in his ear to let this gift change his life. You see, it's grace, kindness that changes people. And Jean Valjean is changed by that, and his life, if you remember Les Mis, his life is turned around from being one of a criminal to being one of a very good and gracious person. It is kindness that changes lives. Not immediately, frustratingly, in messy ways, but it's possible and it happens. So I want to encourage you to be kind. So that's the podcast today. Thanks for joining in, participating. I'd encourage you to subscribe on iTunes and comment, give us a rating. 5-star rating would be great. Give us a rating, and plan to be a part of the It's Pronounced Ryerse experience week after week. I want to end with a benediction, some words to maybe to guide you, and in light of our conversation today about how change happens and how that comes about through kindness, I thought I'd close with some famous words, but words that are inspiring nonetheless, from Baba Ram Dass. Ram Dass, influential spiritual thinker and leader, who said these words: "We are all just walking each other home." We are all just walking each other home. It's great to be with you today, friends. I'll see you next week. And in the meantime, be here now.